What you need to do is find out what you believe and stick to that. Stick to your beliefs and let those beliefs grow into a system that you stick with for life.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast. It's Walter here, and I've got Darren on the line. G'day, Darren.
Morning, Walter.
So it's kind of an interesting idea that you came up with that we're going to use for today's topic. And I'll just let all the listeners know. So I received this cryptic email from Darren. It says, the secret to becoming a great trader is to divorce your wife, sell your kids, sell your house, move up a mountain, live naked in a wood shack, and eat vegetables from your garden. So, Darren, please explain what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, when I sent that email, I was trading. I was a bit bored, but you know, there is kind of a serious point to it, which was this idea that a lot of people think to find happiness in their life and control in their life, what they really need to do is just kind of simplify, sell everything, move up a mountain, block out the rest of the world and kind of live this holistic lifestyle. And I just thought there is a kind of parallel there with trading, and it's this idea of kind of removing distractions from your trading. And, on the obvious level, the distractions of your everyday life, like your spouse and your family and problems you've got outside of trading. Maybe, you've got debt, bills to pay, other stuff that have to do that gets in the way of your trading. But then going deeper on from that, I think there's distractions in the way that we choose to trade and the stuff that we kind of involve in our trading, in our strategy, in the way we kind of set up to trade. And I think also that if you can reduce those number of distractions as well, then I think you're better set to trade profitably long term. And those distractions can be, I see a lot of traders that trade very technical approaches with price action, and then they sit in a chat room and talk about the news all day. And I'm thinking, you're not actually using this to trade at all for your strategy, but you're all sat here discussing it and throwing out assumptions about how relevant it's going to be to trade. And I think we can kind of get caught in this trap where if we just have lots of information, whether we're using it or not, then that can't be a negative thing. And I think it can. It can throw you off. And I think it happens on a really sort of subconscious level and you don't notice that it's really happening. So, yeah, the point is that you should really have a look at the distractions that are going on when you're trading, or the distractions that are perhaps part of your trading setup and strategy that might be making the whole process harder for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one of the things that first springs to mind when you mention this is how we're basically living in an age of distraction. I mean, if there's one sort of thing that I could say about our modern life. Now, assuming that you're not living in a shack up on the mountain as a recluse and completely unplugged, most of us would have to admit, on some level, we live in an age of distractions. I mean, just thinking back to the 80s, back in the 80s in the U.S., there was basically, and same here in Australia, you basically had a few different choices in terms of what you were going to watch on TV. And now you've got this wealth of choice. And it's the same thing with the internet. When the internet first popped up, there was basically two sort of internets. There was the academic internet / military internet, and then there was porn, right? I mean, and then now you have everything. You have every single type of niche you can think of is listed, and it's a deep niche in the internet. If you wanted to look up somebody who can give you advice on what happens to your ferret when you put your ferret into a hospital and the veterinarians go in and do deep brain surgery on your ferret, you can find that on the internet. Like, that's there. So we live in this age of distraction, I would say. And so what you're kind of tapping into here is this idea that it's not so good for the trader, right?
Yeah, I don't think it is. And, also when we come to designing our strategy, that we see it there as well. We think that adding extra parameters to the sort of key, the entry, the management, the exit, are somehow that kind of extra information is always going to be a bad thing. And I read that the more parameters you add, the more likely it is you're going to be data mining and curve fitting, and it's that system is going to be less robust in the long run. And I think it's something that we all do, and it's very hard to resist. Now, how do you kind of plan to remove distractions? How do you decide what elements are distractions and what are actually helping you achieve your goals? I unfortunately don't have a simple answer for that, and I think that probably varies from trader to trader.
Yeah, I think I agree. Obviously, with the system creation, the one thing that I've always sort of based my trading on is this idea that the more simple, robust systems you trade, the more likely they are to last, and hopefully the less likely you are to say, the market's changed, or things have changed, I got to throw this away. That's a different, separate issue. But the other thing that comes to mind here is that I can imagine some people are listening to this thinking, well, that's true. If I could just focus in on my trading, it would be so much better. I'm going to quit my job now. So what would you say to that? Because to me, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah, that is, if your job, if you can identify that your job is the reason that you're not being as successful as you should be, if it's reducing your profitability, and you're sure of that, then maybe. But I think often that's a case of kind of just focusing on the money, on the goal. Well, as soon as I quit my job, then I'm definitely going to win more money, and I doubt that is usually the problem. The reason you're losing money is probably something more within you than your job. And me personally, I keep other work outside of trading because that kind of keeps me grounded. And obviously I don't do it in a way that it interferes with my trading. So if I'm having to physically do another job when I should be making an entry or exit decision, then that would be distracting. So I make sure that the two don't clash. But I actually get some benefits from having some time away. And that was another really great comment I heard from a trader this week, and he said that we spend so much time in this kind of microscope staring at the data, perhaps staring at our charts and looking at price action, and we're taking all this data in, and if you don't once in a while kind of step away from that, your brain doesn't actually do anything with that data. And then when you go and do something else, then sometimes the brain synthesizes it, he says, and then you kind of get these little light bulb moments. So I think it's kind of important to work out what is actually a distraction, and and what is actually, some things can actually be beneficial. And again, really, you kind of need to have this very honest appraisal of your trading and be able to work out which elements are really helping your trading and which elements are really just distractions.
Yeah, and obviously for the traders who are thinking, I think I better quit my job so I can focus in on my trading and get better at that, and then then the money will flow. I think the next issue that will pop up most likely for many people is that you get to the point now where, you don't have your income coming in anymore, and the pressure mounts, and that changes sort of your approach. You need more trades or whatever it is that will change the way that you probably would have traded if you had a stash of money in the bank account to tide you over for 9 months. So there are other things that come into play other than distractions, I would say.
Yeah,
obviously. The other thing that I would say, though, is that one thing that I've noticed from traders, like institutional traders, bank traders that I've spoken to, is the biggest complaint they have. Do you know what it is? The biggest complaint is they've got an overload of information. So they've got too much information. So if you're working at a bank trading desk or you're working at a fund and you've got all these analysts working for you, either way, they're basically sending you all this crap. You've got to wade through all of this. And it's one of those things where a lot of these people, they actually make a conscious decision to turn off and just focus on a few different things. And that's, to me, that's the big message when you're thinking about this, is this idea of focus, and how when we focus on something, we get more of that. And it's funny the way it works that way, but it tends to be in life, I've found anyway, and many others I know, that when you start focusing on one thing, you seem to get more of that. So that's what I would say to traders who are concerned about the news, if you've got a technical system, or not sure if you know exactly what's going on. Like, this is one of the things that people tell me, people who don't really know much about trading, the first assumption they make is, oh my gosh, you must have to spend a lot of time analyzing all of the newspapers and everything that's going on in the world. And the reality is, for me at least, it's actually the opposite. It's that I try and stay away from that as much as possible and just look at the charts. So, and that's what happens when you become a technical trader and you try and steer clear of those funny mentals, as I like to call them. But I'm interested in getting your take on this idea of focus, Darren. So if you agree, is it something that you can consciously adopt? Because I know your point about this idea that we collect information in our dreams, collect information and then we need time to actually let it stew and analyze. And I think a lot of that for some people happens in your dreams. And if you've ever had a situation where you had a problem and you were stewing over it for some time, and then all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and you have the solution, I think even if you don't remember your dream, it might be that may be what's going on. There is some data that suggests, and some anecdotal evidence from people throughout the years who have used dreams, and this idea that when they've got this idea that they're trying to figure out their issue. What's the problem here? How do I fix this problem? That's my main issue. And they'll actually, when they go to sleep, they'll actually consciously say, okay, now I'm going to work on this as I'm sleeping, and when I wake up, I'll have the answer. So I think there's a lot to be said for that idea that you were talking about, where we actually spend time working on issues, even though we don't really know that we're doing that. It's kind of in the background subconsciously.
Yeah, I think most traders with any longevity of some consistent success, I think they've got to a point where they understand what is the key thing that makes my trading work. Obviously when you start out, then it's very hard to get to that point, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time sticking at the same thing through a lot of bad results. And I think in those periods, then you do kind of need to take in a lot of data, and it can be a distraction to you. But there is kind of like a line that you get over where, okay, look, I understand what it is about how I trade and my system that works. This idea, there's like one core idea that just works, and anything else really doesn't matter. And then you kind of get to the point where you can go and look at more information because your one core idea is ingrained in you. It works. So it's very hard to get shaken out of that kind of confidence in your system. Obviously you have peaks and troughs. So, for example, I can go and sit in a chat room which is talking purely about technical levels and price action, and at the same time be trading a system that doesn't use any of that and not be swayed by it. And in fact, it actually becomes good extra information because I can say, okay, I appreciate that people don't trade the way I do, and I can just kind of see how they're trading. And in a way, it kind of gives me confidence in my opposite view. Whether it's like that for everyone, I couldn't say. But yeah, you do reach a point where you have this kind of pinpoint focus on your kind of key element, where this is the thing that works for me, And you kind of have this feeling that although you might kind of tweak it over time, you can't really see yourself ever trading another way. And I can't say whether every trader gets to that point, but I'm sure there must be something similar for everyone that makes it as a trader.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you need to define yourself as a trader and say, okay, well, this is the thing that I can definitely say I believe in. So, for example, you might be a trader out there who trades reversion to the mean. So the instrument that you use or the way that you do that as a technical trader may be that you look at pivots. So if the market gets to the R2 or R3 or whatever, you go the other way, or if it gets to the end of your Bollinger Band, you go the other way. That's kind of your core idea, is reversion to the mean. And then if you're a trend trader, of course, you're saying my core idea is that the market occasionally takes off in these strong trends, and I want to capitalize on that. So you're always kind of trying to capture that. If you're support and resistance, you say the market, as I am, you say the market tends to find these areas where it reacts, and so you've got to decide what to do when the market gets there. All of these different ideas you can use, but your point is well taken, which is, if you get to that point where you have so much data under your belt, so many experiences, so many trades under your belt, you will eventually decide, okay, I can see why these people are trading Bollinger Bands, but that's not for me. And in a way, it's almost like watching other, I don't know, for me, it's kind of like watching other parents and with their kids, see how they are parenting. And you may not agree with what they do, but I suppose it's just kind of, and in a way, like you say, Darren, it kind of confirms your own view. So we're kind of all living in this confirmation bias, aren't we, with this cognitive bias where we just sort of see what fits our theory. And I see the other parents, and I think, okay, well, that's the way they're doing, but I would never do that. And I think it's kind of the same thing that you're talking about with the systems. When you see other people in forums or whatever talking about this system or that system, you say, okay, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that works for them, but that would never be something I would do.
Yeah, I've done that in the school playground as well. But I'll tell you the other thing I notice as well is you quite often see with developing traders, they'll kind of find an idea. Perhaps, someone that you're chatting to you'll explain a system of trading, and they kind of run with it, and they're very excited, and they do lots of testing, and they're really into it, and then all of a sudden they'll just blow up and completely disappear, and you won't hear from them for weeks on end. And then you find that sooner or later they'll come back and they'll say, right, okay, I've just cut myself off from everything. I cut out the chat room and the forum, and I went away, and then they seem to come back and they seem to kind of find their groove then. I think it's when you're kind of changing your beliefs. So you've started out taking in all this information and none of it's quite coming together, and then you get something that you really believe in, and all of that sort of prior information gets in the way of you nailing it as such, and you kind of have to cut yourself off from it all. And this was like the original idea, this notion of disappearing up a mountain and cutting yourself off. And I've seen it happen time and time for traders. I think, yeah, he's doing really well, and then all of a sudden he'll disappear, and I won't hear from them for weeks on end, and I'll think, oh, okay, well, they've obviously lost all their money or gone to trade another way. And then they'll pop back up and they'll say, I just cut myself off, and it's all come together now, and I'm doing really well. I've had 3 months consistently winning or whatever. So there's kind of this, yeah, you do need to cut yourself off from it, and I think it could be a good method for helping traders. Yeah.
I think when I hear the story about someone doing that, I often think, well, it's probably something related to risk management, but doesn't necessarily have to be risk management that blows them up. It could also be that they've bent the rules or gone somewhere outside of what they were originally planning to do. But I think that the point is focus is what leads them to where they want to go. For traders who are starting out and they find 2 or 3 systems they like, I always say just focus on the one and let that one be your. That's the way to make it work to me, is to make sure that you are really, really good at one thing, and just dive into that and let the other stuff come up later after you've sort of, quote, mastered that over a year, 2, 3 years. Then you can move on to something else, because otherwise you just get stuck in that cycle of always looking for the next best thing. And it's just not, I don't know anyone who can find a system, trade a system, do well, throw it away, go find a completely different system, trade that system, do really well. I mean, it's not that common that you do that. What you're doing now is you're just sort of, you keep setting yourself back if you keep looking for a better system, when your issue is probably more likely related to mindset or money management, and that's the issue here. It's not the system. And so I think for those traders out there who are wondering, what can I do? I think focus is a valuable thing, and you can even apply this. Like, let's say that you do have a job. Well, okay, so how do you create a little universe where you're just focusing on your trading? Well, you could tell your family, like, look, this is, or your roommates or whatever, your flatmates, say, look, this is what's happening. When I get home from work, I'm going to spend 90 minutes on the charts, and I don't need any distractions. So don't let anyone come into my room. And you have a little area that you just do your trading in that area, in that spot. And so what ends up happening is you associate trading with that. You create a habit over time. You're doing the same thing in the same spot, analyzing your charts or whatever. So maybe you have a job and you're looking at the daily charts. So maybe you do that every morning or every evening. It doesn't really matter. The point is getting into that routine and focusing on that issue, on that system, and getting good at that. That's really where you're going to make your gains. It's not going to be by scrapping your system because you had another 30% drawdown. So to me, that's the way to make this work for traders. And I think that everyone gets what they want out of the markets. If you want to go on a chat room or whatever and talk about how you blew up your account once again for the third time this year, well, that's what you're getting out of being in the markets. You're getting these war stories you can tell your friends and buddies on the chat, or some people that they want to get something else from the markets. Maybe they want to be associated with Darren. So they say, Darren's a cool guy, so I'm gonna associate with myself with Darren and trade like he does. Well, that's not really going to get you there either. What you need to do is find out what you believe and stick to that. Stick to your beliefs and let those beliefs grow into a system that you stick with for life. So that would be my advice. And I know some people listening to this want us to say, yes, focus. You need to focus on trading, quit your job, and then everything good will happen. Well, I don't think that's going to work either. I think for a lot of people, that just puts too much pressure on. Unless you have a big pile of money that you can rely on, and you really reduce the stress to make a consistent income from your trading, I think that's not going to work either. So those would be my sort of suggestions. Do you have any, Darren, for our listeners?
Yeah, well, I'd say definitely don't quit your job until you've got a year of profitable trading. And I remember people saying stuff like that to me and thinking, what, a year? I've got to wait a year? I want to quit next week, And I remember that really vividly, actually. And yeah, you need a year. And even if you do have a big pile of cash, if you don't know what you're doing, then you've just got more money to lose in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the last thing is, for me, is, you don't have to know it all. I know so little about trading in its entirety. I don't know what binary options are. I don't know what COT data is. I don't know the difference between an ECN broker and I don't know all of this information. You don't have to know every single thing about the markets and every element. You just have to have your one great idea, and that can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to come from other people's rules. So don't feel that you need to know absolutely everything there is to know about trading. I think I've read one trading book. When I first started, in my first month of trading, I bought a Wiley Basics of Technical Analysis book. That's the only trading book I've ever read. So, and again, I'm not knocking learning things, and I'm not knocking reading. Actually, reading is supposed to be really helpful. But I just kind of want to stress that you don't have to know it all to find your edge and your way of trading.
That's a great piece of advice. We at a recent workshop, one of our traders who was making good money, and he's a great trader, he felt like he was missing out, that he didn't understand all these other things like stochastics and moving out. He felt like he needed to widen his education. And you know what we all told him? All these more experienced traders just basically said, no, don't do it. Get away from that. Exactly what you just said, Darren. We said, look, you get away from all that and just focus in on the thing that you do well. And it's fascinating, but I feel like in a lot of things we feel like we need to know everything. And if you want to go ahead and be get all those certifications like CM, certified market technician, and all that stuff, they'll make you learn all that stuff. You know what I mean? And the funny thing is, it's not going to help. Like if I went and sat down right now and tried to take the CMT test or whatever it's called, there's no way I would succeed, because they set things up and say, well, this is what the moving average is going to tell you and all that. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain set way of thinking that you're supposed to wear that hat and think just like everyone else. And I think that's absolutely crazy when it comes to trading. So yeah, I agree with that advice, Darren. That's great advice. And in fact, when you say read, what would you tell people to read? I know what you're going to say, but what you say, okay, so let's not read books about trading. Well, what should they be reading?
I'd read novels, switch off from the charts, read novels, learn about people and characters. Have a breadth of knowledge. Don't have a knowledge of trading. Learn about all of the things in the world that you might be interested in, or you might be good, or you might have some empathy with, and those will make you a more rounded person, and you'll be able to examine yourself much more accurately when you're trading, and see your flaws and see what you're really good at. So yeah, go for a breadth of knowledge much more than just thinking about trading all the time.
Yeah, and I think reading books about history, seeing how different crowds react to different things. I think reading about psychology. I think reading about neuroscience. I think reading about lots of different things are going to help you in trading. And probably much more so than reading a book on some guy who's going to tell you about the Bollinger Band. So yeah, these are some things that we can use. These are like concrete pieces of advice that you can use if it resonates with you. And I really want to thank you, Darren, because this was I have to admit, when I got the email, I thought, what the, what's going on here? But I'm glad that we talked about this, because it's a really important aspect of trading, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, brilliant chat, Walter, and I will see you next time.